Hey friends, I've got an opportunity in a podcast for some of you Apple enthusiasts with a funny bone out there, the Cultcast Podcast. It's the official podcast of Cult of Mac. If you're looking for a tech podcast that doubles as a comedy cast, this show is for you. It's a 30-minute show that gives you the biggest news headlines in the Apple and tech sphere for that week. It's literally a one-stop shop for Apple news, reviews, and how-tos. The team is an international squad of Apple experts. They blog around the clock. They've also written for Wired, Scientific American, The Guardian, and Fast Company. They'll sift through all the rumors, the tweets, and the news coverage of the week and bring you what's most important, and they'll have a ton of laughs while doing it. Join the community and stay up to date on everything Apple in just 30 minutes a week and have some fun doing it. Find Cultcast wherever you listen to podcasts or at cultofmac.com. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Layla Porter, a .NET developer advocate and educator, a YouTube creator, a conference speaker, and a general expert in everything .NET. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for hanging out with me. I saw you talk at Copenhagen Developer Festival and then later at .NET Conf, and folks can find those talks online. And you've got this one talk that I'm just such a fan of. It's such a great talk because the title is awesome and it's like brings you in. So it's called ASP.NET Basics for Experts. What is going on with that title?
Well, it came about because all of my teammates are Java experts, and I needed to give a session with one of my teammates. And he's pretty much an expert in everything, just with Java and Spring. So I came up with this, well, he knows all the concepts, he just doesn't know how to do them in .NET. So that's how it started. And then it kind of evolved into just a general recap. Because you know what it's like when you're an expert and you do code day in, day out, you get stuck in your ways and you never, ever, ever think about the fundamentals. You just forget that half of this stuff exists. So I kind of did it for that, just a reminder that you can go and be reminded of the stuff that you need to learn.
Okay, so then that brings up the question then, if you think about it in the terms of human languages, there's the argument that if you know Spanish, you can learn Italian and you can learn Portuguese because they're all kind of in the same family. And you always end up meeting people who speak Spanish. Oh yeah, and I picked up Portuguese in a weekend or whatever. Now that's an oversimplification. But it shows a direct relationship, a familial relationship. Is ASP.NET, or actually is all web frameworks so similar that we can switch between them, like Italian and Spanish and Portuguese?
I don't know about that. I think if they have similar structure, like Java and .NET, they're very similar. They have similar ideas. They have dependency injection and things like that. Then yes. But if you go to languages that don't support those principles, and some languages just don't, then that makes it less simple to go over, I think. And it depends how functional they are, or if they're object-oriented, or whatever it is. There has to be some sort of commonality. Like all these languages are Latin-based. It doesn't mean that just because you know one Latin-based language that you'll be able to learn a Slavic language. I guess there has to be that common thread through it all.
That's a very good analogy. Now it makes me wonder which web framework is Slavic. Now I dig into that. But as a general point, we're all talking HTTP, we're all talking over the wire, we have to deal with cookies, we have to deal with headers. So you're saying that in some cases we have found commonality around pipelining, for example, requests come in and they go through a pipeline, and many languages have that as a concept.
Absolutely. So with languages, I do strongly believe that it's the intricacies and those little finagly bits that you have to learn. It's not about knowing how to do something. It's knowing that it can be done, and then you can go and find out how you do it. And if you go to a language and you're like, right, I know this can support dependency injection. We just need to know how to do it, don't you? But it's about knowing that something can be done in it, that it supports it, that you can just switch over that existing knowledge of those patterns and principles and just implement them in new ways. And I think people oversimplify it, though, because it's about knowing all those APIs, all those different methods that are put in place by the people like on the .NET team. And just not knowing those APIs can be really crippling if you're so familiar with them in another language.
When you are doing a basics talk for experts, do you, in this case, you were doing it like you designed this talk for some Java colleagues, you just knew that they had dependency injection. Did you have to think about what kind of experts they were? Would you do a different talk if it was ASP.NET for Ruby on Rails experts?
I think I had to know what they were sort of doing. So that's why the talk kind of evolved more into ASP.NET Basics for .NET experts in the end. And I think I would have to tailor it for different audiences to support the different things that the parallels that we have with that particular language. I think I would have to, I guess what it is if you already know something and you're just told how to do it in a different way, you have that familiarity and you're like, oh, I already know this concept and oh, this is how I do it. If you're faced with learning a concept and then how to do that, that can be quite daunting. And I think a nice way into different programming languages is first learning how to do what you already know how to do and then learning the harder stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's why Hello World has just become such a fun way to start. It's like everyone can say Hello World and everyone basically understands a string. So we start there. I'm finding, however, when I'm teaching new people that the console is less and less a place where they want to spend their time. Like Hello World for a certain generation is like a complete WordPress site deployed into the cloud. And I'm like, no, let's make a fun little calculator at the command line. And they're like, my kids are not interested in that. If it's not a website that has full commerce and Stripe integration, they're not interested.
It's funny because my first workshop that I built for a girls' code group was a text adventure game in a console. And they loved it. And I gave that for adults as well. I did an evening course just for any adult that wanted to come. I hired a venue and just opened it up on Meetup. And the things that people did with ASCII art and everything, it was fantastic. So I think if you can connect with people, like make something that is fun to build and they want to see it through to completion, then I think you can do great things. And I think it's all about making learning fun. I'm such a big fan of making learning fun and entertaining. I always try to bring humor into my talks, into my workshops, whether it's in the demo. I think it just draws people in. It can be a very dry subject, I think, programming, because we're so passionate about it. And you forget what it's like when you come into it and you think, oh my goodness, look at all these lines of code. Really? People enjoy this? What planet are they from? So if you can make it fun and humorous and make them smile whilst they learn, you can teach anything.
Very much. I think you and I, we speak at a lot of the same conferences, and we are similar in that respect. I use the word edutainment. Right?
Absolutely.
I've always remembered that my teachers had fun, and if your teacher is excited, then you're going to be excited. And I've always liked those teachers that were almost over the top excited, because when you come into the class the first time, you're just like, really, this is not that exciting. Like, turn it down a bit. But then by the end, that excitement is infectious. So yeah, web development can be fun.
I think so. It's great just to make it fun. And I like teaching fun stuff. Otherwise, I just get bored myself and think, oh my goodness, have I got to drone on about this topic again? But if I can bring up some lousy dad jokes, that's one of my favorite APIs to use, is the dad joke API. And that makes everybody laugh. And that just flashes stuff up on the console. And it's just entertaining. And I'm like, these are not my jokes. And they're terrible. They are absolutely terrible.
As a lousy dad, I appreciate that. So ASP.NET is one of these things that I think is in a challenging place right now in like the history of computing. And let's get like a little deep here for a second, because it's got the name .NET, which a lot of people feel has some baggage to it. It turns people off because they're like, I know this thing. It's old. It's crusty. But there's some really new, interesting stuff happening. And you talk about these things, minimal APIs and Aspire and discovery and resiliency and like all these modern concepts. And you've done a lot of work in the cloud native space. When teaching these things to the Java folks, to the folks that speak other languages and other frameworks, have you come up against those biases where they are stuck in the year 2000 version of ASP.NET and they're not willing to learn about the modern third decade of the 21st century version of ASP.NET?
Completely. You just saying that is just making me laugh, because some of the stick I get from my teammates who, as I mentioned, are all Java developers. They're like, oh, you capitalize everything wrong. And all of this, I just think, oh, can we move beyond this? And the number of times people are just like, oh, it's slow. It's this. It's Windows only. And I think you've all had your head in sand, not getting with the program and just learning about what's changed. I'm sure plenty has changed in their favorite programming language, and they'd be happy to tell me about it, but they're just not listening to all the great stuff that has changed, especially since .NET went open source and all those different things and all the variety that you can do. Yeah, they ridicule it for everything it's worth. And I think that's just out of lack of knowledge and a fear of change. And they just want to be with the cool kids who are just taking the mickey out of something just because.
Would you rename it? Would you just call it something else? Just like Aspire is a name, but we put .NET in front of it. They could have just called it like Saturn. Just pick a word, right? Pick a noun. Would you throw away 20 years of naming?
That's a really, really tricky question, because I think if the name was changed, you could appeal to maybe new people who might jump on the bandwagon because, oh, this is new and it's so cool, and you lose all the connotations that .NET has accrued over the 20 odd years. But you also lose that trust, I think, because a lot of the enterprise, and I work predominantly with enterprise customers, they trust .NET because it's been around so long. It has that record of good security and updates and everything that goes along with a big enterprise product. And I think they're so slow moving. If you changed it to something else, they would think, oh, this is new. It's not just a rebrand. And they wouldn't adopt it for like 5 years. I mean, I still work with so many customers who are still, on Framework, and we're talking early versions of Framework. And I still work with customers who have hundreds of apps in classic ASP. So, it's you see how slow it is for people to change. And I think if the name was changed, you'd have some benefits of new people coming in and all that lost baggage, but you lose that trust and that, oh, okay, we're just going to upgrade a version, not change our whole tech stack, which would be the connotation. Because you couldn't explain to, I don't know, the product manager or the CTO that, no, it's the same product. They've just renamed it. That wouldn't float with them.
But a lot has changed, though. Like, I think that when .NET hit, I don't know, I started in web forms. A lot of people came from like Visual Basic, the whole kind of like event on click. And then you move to web forms and you go, oh, this is familiar. You get eventing over, which is funny because we're still trying to recreate that, by the way. Like, everyone craps on web forms 20 years later, but they're all trying to reinvent its convenience, right? But that said, then we come out with Razor pages and then Blazor and then minimal APIs. Is that too much? Is it confusing? I like it because I feel like it's a cafeteria. I feel like it's a food court of technologies. And I come in and I go, I want a little of this and I want a little of that. And I have a route for one web API and I have a route for my Razor page. But are all of those ASP.NET, or should they be separate things?
I like the choice, personally. I like being able to choose the right tool for the job and having that single language and the comfort in knowing that, oh, this is all just the same thing. I've dabbled with Unity, and that familiarity of knowing it's just C# is great. And I know that's not ASP.NET, but I still know that it shares a lot of the commonalities with that and the familiarity. So I think having it all as ASP.NET as one big umbrella is fine, as long as the support for all the different products is there, the learning pathways and the how-tos. And I think if things are too similar, people don't know what they should use. So I've been asked recently, should I still use Razor pages? And I think, well, if that suits you and you like it, go ahead. There's still a lot to like about Razor pages. should you go and use Blazor? Well, if that suits you, go and use Blazor. I mean, I'm still such a huge, huge fan of MVC. I'm always going to be the biggest fan of that. I love how it all connects together and that sort of served up thing. It's just so easy. And as a way to learn, I quite like to teach MVC to new people who want to do web development. I think you can see the back end and the code there, and having it all under that one umbrella makes it familiar to everybody, regardless of which product you use. So I think it's good, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I when in your talk, you spend a lot of time in what used to be startup.cs, but what in your talk is program.cs. You basically look at the pipeline, builder.this and builder.that. You build up the services. And I feel like if I were to teach ASP.NET today and people were finding all of those other sub-frameworks overwhelming, I'd start at the builder and I'd start at routing. Like, let's talk about URLs. Who's handling this? Because it's really just about these handlers. The podcast website that folks are on right now is a Razor Pages website. Now, it just as easily could be MVC, because remember, of course, that it's MVC. It's all MVC all the way down, right? Because it's all the builder pattern all the way down. And I didn't do the podcast site as an MVC site because there really wasn't any controller. It's just returning a page with some basic loops, like for each show in shows. MVC seemed overkill, but I could always, I guess, upgrade. But then Blazor, wouldn't you agree that for this podcast site, Blazor would be just like more than is necessary?
I think it could be. The thing is with Blazor, it's got a certain level of complexity. I think if you're going with like a server and a client, which is generally what you have, you are adding that extra bit of complexity. It's not so easy to follow the path of the request, and you've got these multiple projects, and it just seems like overkill unless you really need that or all the things that Blazor gives you. I can't even think of half the stuff it does. It's been...
Well, I mean, I think of Blazor as being the second coming of web forms in the best possible way. It brings the right amount of state at the right time. That's how I look at it. But I didn't mean to put words in your mouth.
No. The way I look at Blazor is a way to compete with a lot of the other clients out there. The sort of Reacts and Angulars and things like that. Because when I was in engineering and I was a full stack dev and I had to do a lot of Angular and TypeScript and all of that, the context switching for me was quite difficult. And the biggest thing for me with something like Blazor is that I don't have to context switch so much. And I think above all else, that's what I found appealing. Not all the bells and whistles and the state management. It was just that not having to switch my brain so much that I liked. But I think it is overkill for a lot of things. And there's nothing beats the sort of simplicity of just serving up a page and knowing what's there and not having to worry, is it SEO friendly and all of those things. Yeah, it is about the right tool for the job. And I think it could have been quite overkill if you'd gone for the whole Blazor and having it all served and then having it all, ahead of time, this and all of the other bells and whistles that go with it. So, and you would have had to have done more work.
Sometimes I wonder if it's a generational thing. If I am picking a technology like out of experience, where I'm thinking, well, I have many years in the biz, therefore I will use my experience to pick this framework. Or I'm doing it based on either a nostalgia or, to your point, you're not going to need it, or this is overkill. Because I look at some new frameworks and I'm like, this is a lot of ceremony to simply say hello world or to simply serve up a page. And that's why I keep coming back to the pipeline, to startup.cs, because that's where you can say hello world with like, here's a Lambda, hello world, return string, and then build from there.
Yeah, that is a big thing for me. You saying ceremony just reminded me of that for all my demos that used to be in MVC, because that's how I'd like to do them. Because that's when I started, was with MVC. That's what I learned. I've now switched to APIs and minimal APIs because I think, well, it is all there. I just do it on the builder, like you say. It's a single page. Now, I hated that when it first started. And that was another thing behind the Basics for Experts talk, was that I absolutely hated the top level statements and this sort of, so lacking in ceremony. And when they got rid of my startup, I was like, I hate it. I hate it. I hated it with a passion. I did everything I could not to use it. And then when I came around to thinking, actually, no, it's there. It's a great way of teaching people because it's so simple. It's all in the one place. I was like, okay, no, I'm going to embrace this. Now, how do I make it work for me? And with the extension methods and things like that. So yeah, it's the lack of ceremony. You saying that just completely reminded me why I changed my mind.
Okay, so yeah, I want to understand how you changed your mind because you had a visceral reaction. Everyone saw, I guess we could call it the builder, the pipeline, the startup.cs, that the autoexec.bat of your web application. You don't like that one? You winced on that one. Too old of a reference, perhaps. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. The config sys of your web. But like everyone, it's the bootstrapper. It's where it all starts. And you didn't like top level statements. And I think it's so funny how people have forgotten the little bit of like .NET kerfuffle that happened when people were like, you move my cheese. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. And it's totally optional. Totally optional.
So I got .NET 6 in and I started to, do .NET New. And I was like, oh, this is horrible. Where is my startup? What is going on? And so do you want to know how I used to get that? Because I used to do a .NET 5 application, or I do .NET New, please use .NET 5. And then I would go and manually upgrade it to .NET 6 so I could get that pattern rather than have the top level statements. That's how I started with it. I was that disgusted by the new format.
Did you have a reason, or was it just a visceral, like, anti?
It was the lack of abstraction, I think. It was seeing when the templates came out and everything was just dumped in program.cs. And I looked at that and I recoiled because, why is everything in this one file? Why is there an API in here with my IOC container? What is going on? Why is this all munged together? It's disgusting. And imagine when you've got 30 dependencies and 100 APIs. I was like, there's going to be people who just put it all in one code file. They're not going to understand that you can abstract it out. And I was disgusted. I was really, really offended by it.
Okay, but now you literally teach it, and you are all about, like, you spend in your talk, ASP.NET Basics for Experts, most of your time is spent either in there or making extensions to make it even simpler. Like, you're all about hiding everything and then making a function called do it, and then adding that function in program.cs. So you've completely, what do they say? Strong opinions, weakly held. You're just like, okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think I looked inwardly and I was like, I don't often have a strong reaction to things. I'm quite laid back about a lot of stuff. And I thought, why are you fighting this so hard and going through all these hoops to make it how it used to be? And then I thought, why are you like, well, this is the way I've always done it, and not embracing change and understanding why this change is in place? And so I was like, okay, so how do I make it work for me? And that's why I share that knowledge in that talk, because I'm like, I had such a visceral reaction to this. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I know at the time when I tweeted about it, because of course you go and have a rant on Twitter, sorry, X, and you talk all about it, and you're like, oh, where are my people? Who thinks the same way as I do? And a lot of people are like, yeah, we hate it too. No. And I was like, yes, see, I feel vindicated.
#.NET drama.
Yes. Oh gosh, don't get me started. I see .NET drama. I'm like, oh my God, I'm just going to go hide off my computer for a while.
It's so invented, though. Everybody just needs to take a breath, because you can write the code whatever way that makes you happy. Like, it's, I don't know. I just have my reaction is to just get more calm. The more people freak out, the more calm I get, which is, I'm sure, annoying in its own way.
I think that's a good way of handling it. I kind of just step away. I get DMs or signal messages saying, oh my God, have you seen this latest drama? Did you hear about that? And I'm like, no, what? Oh, okay. Well,
yep. Sleeping like a baby.
Yeah, not that bothered. Doesn't affect me. You do you.
Exactly. You do you. I wanted to ask you as we get towards the end here, you over the years have talked about minimal APIs and HTTP clients, resiliency. It feels to me like .NET Aspire, the new cloud native .NET patterns, would be your jam because you were already effectively doing it on your own by pulling together lots of different libraries and different things from different places.
It has been so unbelievably exciting, to be honest. I saw it before it went live. I saw it at a conference where Scott Hunter gave a talk about this new secret thing that was based on Project Time. I was like, oh my goodness, tell me more. And then when it was announced and launched at .NET Conf, I was like, oh, I can't wait to play with this. And the very next day, I got it all downloaded and I was doing all the things with it. I released a video after it, and I think it's really exciting. I can't wait to see where it goes, to be honest. I think there's so much in this early preview version to love that once all the little niggles are sorted out and it's released and it's gone through a couple of versions, that it's going to be really fantastic and change the way that we build cloud-ready applications. It has so many cool things in it. I just love like the default resiliency. That to me is just such a win because people don't think about resiliency of their requests, whether they're HTTP or just regular method calls to databases. They don't think about that and putting in policies and stuff. And just having that straight out of the box is a great way of educating developers when they come in. Like, oh, what's this? Oh, I could add this onto something else. So just having it there as a default, it's awesome. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it seems really, really good because it is up-leveling Hello World to distributed, resilient Hello World.
Yeah,
and it's opinionated. It's like I've long said to the .NET team, to David Fowler and all of them, like let's just have an opinion. Like, people don't have to like it, but rather than offering every opportunity and every option, we do the work, we do the research, and we come up with a best practice, and then we codify best practice. And I think that .NET Aspire has done that. And I was looking at Nick Chops's YouTube. He seems to agree. You agree. You do live streaming, live coding. You seem to agree. So that makes me feel like they're on the right track.
I think so. I was at a conference 2 weeks after the announcement, and I brought Aspire into my demos, and the audience loved it. They are really excited about Aspire. I think it's coming at the right time where distributed systems are causing enough headaches for developers that they want a solution that helps them write it in a better way. So yeah, I think it can only do good.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on to chat about all my favorite things.
Absolutely. Well, I want to encourage everyone who's listening to go and search for ASP.NET Basics for Experts and check out different versions of Layla's talk. I think that the Copenhagen Developer Festival one was an excellent version of that talk, and I enjoyed it very much. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.